and we're going to have a conversation about Black men and mental health. This conversation, I'm just a vessel in this moment. This is all about the conversation that's going to be with Robert and Jimmy, and I'm just here to facilitate. So, Jimmy, why don't we start with you? Why don't you start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm happy to be here and share my story. Again, my name is Jimmy Gibbs. I am from North Carolina. I was born and raised in the Triangle area. My family's been there since the pretty much late to mid 1800s. A lot of history there. I'm an ordained minister in the United Church of Christ. I am a retired journalist. I'm missing our national meeting this week in Chicago, but I would have loved to have been in our DBSA offices as well to visit. So I bring you greetings from there. I'm a PA as well as a minister, and I've been a hospital chaplain, and I've done a lot of different things. But my claim to fame is I've been a facilitator with DBSA for more than 30 something years. I won't exactly give you the date, but I still try to look young. But I've been around a long time, and I appreciated the presentation on PTSD because at the time that we started our chapter, most of our men were serving in Iraq. They were serving in the war. They had come back from the war. And so we really had to face those challenges even then in our DBSA local chapter meetings. So thank you for sharing that and giving us some further insight into how to take care of our veterans. Thank you for being on the call, and I hope to engage further.
Thank you, Jimmy. Robert, same question. Do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your journey?
Sure. Thank you, Kimberly. Thank you also, Ahmad, for sharing that earlier. I'm Robert Dabney Jr. Originally, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I left for the Army as soon as I graduated high school. Joined the Army as a medic and stayed in for 9 years. Did the deployment to Iraq twice and a few other deployments, but Iraq was the main combat situation. Got out of the military in 2007, went back home to Memphis with no real journey or career aspirations in mind. Eventually, I started going into the jails and engaging with prisoners, and decided to use my GI Bill to go to school to become a prison chaplain. And so I started that journey back in 2010. In 2017, I graduated with my master's degree in divinity and began working as a hospital chaplain instead of a prison chaplain. That was the only thing that was available at the time as far as work went. And so I started working as a hospital chaplain in 2017. Eventually, I resigned from that position in January of 2020 for my own mental health. Not only from my military experience, I have been diagnosed with PTSD, major depression disorder, and generalized anxiety, and all those things began to create a whirlwind of just stress and trouble within me, in a way that didn't allow me to show up for work. A lot was described in the unemployment slide that Ahmad showed earlier. Just really having trouble with my executive functioning skills, being able to recall things, being able to engage with people, being able to remain calm when things are going out of plans. And so I resigned and just began to take care of myself, learning what that meant. It was the first time I ever really addressed my mental health. And so in doing so, I came across peer support, and that eventually introduced me to the Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance. I started working with a peer support specialist myself, and eventually I came on as a co-worker there at DBSA, and was able to train other individuals from the South and West sides of Chicago on becoming a peer support specialist in the state of Illinois. And I did that work with DBSA for about 2 years. Close to the end of that, I was eventually introduced to another organization, the one that I work with now. It's called Boulder Crest Foundation, and we provide post-traumatic growth training to combat veterans, first responders, and we're also opening up the field to be able to provide this training to others. But the topic around mental health PTSD is very dear to my heart. It was with me, a part of my experience before joining the military, as Ahmad shared. A lot of that happened before even going into the military, and it's still a part of me today. And these conversations and the other rooms I get to be a part of are ways that I'm learning to deal with life and to be able to approach it from a more confident perspective. And so I'm grateful to be here and to be a part of this conversation. Thank you. The first recollections, I remember just being a child, and seeing people in the community that were walking down the street talking to themselves, or doing things that just didn't seem right. And we either would say they're on drugs, or we call it a derogatory name, or that person's crazy. And that began to shape my worldview as it relates to mental health, so much that when things started to show up in my life, I wouldn't tell anyone about it because I didn't want to be labeled as someone that was hooked on drugs or crazy, quote unquote. That was the first introduction. Going into the military, coming out, and then actually being able to face those realizations for myself, it took place in the home. My wife, who knew me from the first year after I joined the military all the way until today, but she was with me that entire time. About 8 years after getting out of the army, around 2013, she told me that she had always told me that she thinks I could use some help. But she never really added any labels to it. But what caught my attention was when she told me that the only people that I have relationships with are people that I knew before going into the military or before seeing combat. Anyone else after that, I didn't trust them, and I always had some reason why I couldn't be in relationship with them or even work in that job. And that made me begin to take a hard look at myself. And I eventually went to the doctor, to the VA, and was diagnosed with PTSD. And that was a major blow to my, I guess, to my self confidence, to my own world, the view of myself. And so, from that perspective, I've been working to one, know that it's okay to not be okay, and two, to know that there is healing available in this situation, and that just because I'm experiencing that challenge doesn't mean that I'm prescribed to a life of a diminished version of myself. It's been a journey.
Thank you for that. Jimmy, did you want to share a little bit about your earlier recollections of hearing or learning about mental health conditions?
Of course, it started with my fourth great grandmother had a mental collapse. She was a school teacher. She served well through the 1800s and early 1900s, and I guess the stress of trying to educate African descendant children was too much for her. And so, fast forward into the 60s when I was born. Some of you may know that I am the product of an unwed mother. I understand the woman who raised me was my biological grandmother. She had this child at a very early age. Um, the biological mother wasn't able to keep me. And so I was raised by them. My childhood was filled with mental and physical abuse. I can say that now because both of them are deceased. I suppressed it, and the more I suppressed it, the more I began to act out. I was depressed, angry. I was lashing out with people around me. I felt unloved because I was brought up as an only child. Um, I knew that there were siblings out there that belonged to me. I just didn't know how to reach them. So I buried myself in a lot of different programs, student council, student government, whatever was the cutting edge thing to do at school, drama. I needed that escape to make sure I felt safe. And the safest place I felt was at school, away from the abuse that I was receiving at home from being a child that was not wanted. It's hard to bring some of this to light because it evokes a lot of emotion in me of anger, of disappointment. I always felt like I had to achieve, overachieve. And you know that causes problems in your later life. I didn't find out until I was a nurse, and everybody says, "Oh, you're just stressed out because you just started nursing. Everything is okay. You're going to be okay." But guess what? I transitioned from being an OBGYN nurse because I wanted to help other unwed mothers. I wanted to help everybody that had a baby because I felt like that was my call. But I morphed into infectious diseases and started working with people who had succumbed to GRID and those precursors to HIV. I felt like that was my calling. I felt like that was what the creator had wanted me to do. I do remember that the work was arduous. It's very hard. And like Robert said, being a chaplain in a hospital, which I was, because you have to remember, I am a fourth generation pastor. So that comes with weight. Just knowing that I came up that route, but the people that raised me were abusive and they were ministers. So I thought all ministers should act like that. And thank God I didn't become a David. I don't have any biological children to worry about, but I cared for so many different children. And I think carrying that weight of mental illness, I didn't want to say that. When I told my mom, the woman who raised me, who happens to be my biological grandmother, I said, I need help. And she said, pray about it. Jesus will help you. So I spent a lot of years praying that nothing happened. It wasn't until I really got out of healthcare because the HIV, the stigma, all of that had just piled on top of me. And I said, I'm going to try a different career. When I went to my different career, guess what saved me? The 8-session program. When I went to that 8-session program, my first one, she looked at me and said, you're bipolar mixed states and you're depressed. I was like, whoa, that's a lot going on. I'm Black. I'm not supposed to be depressed. I got my life ahead of me. I'm doing everything I want to do. I've got this great job. I am on top of the world. And let me tell you, I was not. I was falling. And what does it say? I'm falling, but I can't get up. I fell down to the pit, y'all. And I had 4 hospitalizations back to back to back to back. They pulled me off all of my meds. They put me on too many meds. I was slobbering. I looked like a crazy person. But you know what? It was in those down times that I found that I could finally rise up and see what my potential was. I didn't know it. You have to remember, all of my family was like, pull up by your bootstraps. You'll be fine. You're just going through this crisis. You'll be fine. I wasn't. It was a 35, 40-year journey for me to get to a point of wellness. It takes a minute to get hold of all of the things that were in my mind swirling around, and things still swirl around. I had a mental breakdown this morning, y'all. And my partner was able to pick me up. I mean, honestly, I'm sitting here in Boston at a meeting looking at African Americans doing research from the African diaspora side. This morning, 2 hours ago, I was crying like a baby to my partner because I felt so overwhelmed with everything that was going on. I'm so honored to be here in the presence of people that are continuing this work. But I guess I just couldn't handle it all. And my partner looked at me and he said, let me tell you, you're in the safest place you can be right now because you're talking to me. And I felt so relieved that he understood everything that I was going through. And I thought it was just amazing that I'm doing this program with you because I want you to see how vulnerable it is and how I wasn't expecting to cry. I wasn't expecting to have a mental health crisis in beautiful downtown Boston, but I did. And so that's where DBSA has saved me. You guys have lifted me up, brought me back to a sense of reality, brought me back to a sense of belonging. And it's nice to belong to this family. So I just wanted to share that with y'all.
Thank you.
A gay Black minister who happens to be a clinician. If anybody could ask for trouble, the quadruple threat is horrible. Triple threat is crazy, but to be a quadruple threat, I have caught hell. Like Natalie Cole used to say, I'm catching hell. I have caught it. But when I catch it, seems like I know how to do it now. I can release it into the world, because I realized that my purpose here is to help, not to cause any harm or further harm. The vulnerability was I had to really open up as a facilitator to let people know that I was diagnosed as bipolar mixed states with depression, and I take blank, blank, blank. It was the hardest thing for me to do, to show up in a DBSA meeting. But let me tell y'all, I have been very clear about this. DBSA saved my life. My parents were still telling me to pull up by the bootstraps because they didn't want to deal with my mental illness. They didn't want to deal with me being in bed for 2 weeks, not taking a shower. They didn't want to deal with that. That wasn't the thing to do. They wanted me to get healed and get healed quickly. I had so much oil slathered all over my body and all over my body. I thought I was being, I thought I was being mummified. But the oil didn't save me. Being in community with people saved me. Being in community, like Robert said, with people like me, that's what saved me. Being in community with people that were peer support specialists, people that were other facilitators, people that were as vulnerable as I was, that was willing to cry at a meeting and say, I need help. That's what saved me. It wasn't the fact that somebody slathered oil all over my body and told me that Jesus was going to save me. It was my DBSA friends that saved me for the 35 to 40 years now. And I've been friends with some of them for over 30 years. They saw that transition. When I went to a DBSA meeting, I was wild. I would change cars out every 6 to 8 months. I spent money like I was a millionaire, and I was poor as Joe's turkey. But that's what it was calling me to do, was just to lash out, just to do all these things. It wasn't until I really sat down with my retired healthcare provider, Dr. Richard Weisler, saved my life, because he would call me in his office and just sit me down and let me take a nap, decompress, get it out so that I could go outside that door and face the world again. Thank God for him and his staff. I had a place to go. Home was not my safety place, y'all. Just because you have a home, my home was full of turmoil, people telling me what to do, how to get fixed, throwing oil on me, telling me Jesus was going to fix it. It wasn't until I came to my DBSA family. They fixed it. Let me tell you. That's my story. I'm sticking with it.
And we appreciate your story, Jimmy. Finding community is one of the tenets that we stand by. Robert, I wanted to pose the same question to you in terms of talking about vulnerability. And I also was, as I was listening to both you and Jimmy speak, recognize that you both have a connection in terms of the church and being a chaplain. So I guess in the interest of getting to an actual question, can you expand a little bit more about your own vulnerabilities, if you would, and how your different roles have played a part in your journey?
Yeah, thank you for the question and opportunity. When you asked it earlier to Jimmy, like, it opened up a whole world of memories that were very difficult. Being
Mm,
vulnerable is probably the hardest thing that I've had to do. Um, in spite of going to combat and doing other things that I've been involved in, actually opening up and showing people what was inside was the most difficult choice that I made. Because I was raised not to do so. I was raised to keep it in. I was raised to put
mhm,
on a strong face. My father was uh, he was in prison for 17 years, and then he got
mm,
out, had me, and so I was raised by a man whose early adulthood was behind bars, and so it's just um, it was a different mentality, a different way of living, and of being a man. Him and his brothers, my uncles, those men that raised me. Um, Having an understanding that there was something inside that didn't feel strong, that didn't feel okay, and trying to find someone to open up and share it to was very alien to me, which caused me to, when I first tried to do it, I was in the safety of what I thought was a community, which was a spiritual community, which was a church setting. And I just opened up and just started letting stuff out, and that just wasn't the right way to go about it. Um, but it wasn't received as I anticipated it to be received. I felt ridiculed. I felt um, as if I was no longer able to be respected among my peers and colleagues. I just felt less than others because I chose to share what I was experiencing. And so after that one experience, I chose not to do it again, and I just continued to try to make it on my own. But eventually, the walls came down, the mask had to come off, and I had to open up again. And I chose to do so. And what I discovered was that it's okay to be vulnerable as long as I choose the right people to do it with. And I think that's what Jimmy was really harping on, the fact that he found a community that he could be vulnerable with. So that's the first hard lesson that I had to learn. Like, it is okay to open up and share, but doing it with the right people. But the more I did that, the more I opened up and shared and was received and not ridiculed, not judged because of it, the less weight I felt I carried on my own. And so it's the act of sharing what was inside with someone that was able to receive it in a respectful way, that really began to help me begin to see myself and how my experiences have impacted me. And not to like put down the church or the Christian, the spiritual community. Is we're all people and we all have our own experiences, and so regardless of which environment I'm in, I know better now than to really open up and share. But I know how important it is to do so. And the people that I open up and share with are not the people that were a part of my spiritual community. It's people that are outside, people that the spiritual community might look at and say they are, less than, or I shouldn't be hanging with them, whatever. But that's where I found community, and in doing so, not only am I able to carry my burdens to them or those things that I'm carrying, but I am now a place that they can feel safe coming to as well. And that's one way that we begin to just help each other walk this path of life. Like, we don't feel like we're taking it all alone. We know there's people that are with us or that are going through their own trials and tribulations, and that we can carry the load together. We can share that load. And so it was one of the most difficult things that I've done, but also it was the best thing that I could have done, which was choosing to be open up, choosing to be vulnerable by opening up and sharing what the truth was that I was carrying inside.
The work that I do now, I work in community engagement around HIV, around stigma, comorbidities, around monkeypox. Whenever something emerging comes up, I'm working with that as a community person to try to bridge that together. One of the things that I did a few years ago was I talked about Blacks in community-based participatory research, why Blacks don't do research. Why don't we do research? One of the biggest things that pops up whenever I talk about Blacks or people of color doing research is what? The Tuskegee um, incident, right? People have started thinking that, Tuskegee kind of is the bedrock of why Blacks don't do this type of research. But let me tell you, when I dug into the trueness of this, Blacks and community-based participatory research started in South America by indigenous people. They started these programs. It wasn't the white man. It were people of color in South America that saw the value in doing research as people of color. Now, yes, we can talk about a lot of things that have happened. There are more than Tuskegee. There are about 18 to 20. We can go and look at the love experience in Virginia. We can look at bathroom experiences that people have had. There are more than 18 if you Google them. And I want you to take time and look at this. Now, I am not married to a Black man, but I'm partnered with a Black man that doesn't want to go to the doctor on a regular basis. He, finally, because of me, he is engaging in a big major surgery that's coming up for some dental work because it was jacked up in New Jersey. It got jacked up in Winston-Salem, so he didn't trust anybody in his mouth. Now I've had to coddle, hold, carry him, and will carry him to the dentist while this treatment is being done. So sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, we have to take someone by the hand, as the song says, precious Lord, and take them to the doctor. So sometimes you just have to hold on to what you know and make sure that your man, your woman, your spouse, your partner is cared for. Now, yeah, I had all the dental, I had everything under the sun. Those abusive parents of mine made sure I went to the dentist at 4 years old, made sure I did this and did that. But guess what? 4 years ago, I had to embark on all of this dental work, and I wore braces, I wore retainers, I did everything right. But it doesn't mean because you do everything right, something won't go wrong. Look at the biblical stories of David. He did a lot of wrong, but he did a lot of right. That's the same story with us today. And I listened to my sister Kim say, I mean, listen to this. We wear the mask, right? Robert Lawrence, read that poem. Why do we wear the mask? Because we don't want people to see the real truth in us. We don't want to be vulnerable. It's hard for Black men to cry. I have only seen my partner in 7 years tear up, and that was at a family funeral. We don't let it out. Black men are scared to cry. We're scared to be vulnerable. We're scared to tell our spouses our heart hurts. We're scared to tell them our chest is tight, and we watch them die on the floor. Why? Because they didn't want to go to the doctor. If they'd have told us, "Hey, I'm feeling a little tightness in my breath, or I feel tightness in my chest. I can't breathe." We dial 911, right? Oh no, I'll take a Tylenol. A Tylenol? No, you're going to the doctor. You're going to the hospital, and I'm gonna be right there when you go through the emergency room. So a lot of times we're scared to go to the doctor because we think something bad is going to happen. But I always have to remember that hospitals are there to heal, and we're there to make sure that they get the best care possible. You don't, I mean, that's how you have to bridge that a little bit. It's, that fear is there. Yes, I'm scared to see a doctor because you don't know what's going to happen. My doctor had my partner's PSA level was all skewed up. He was scared to death. He thought he had cancer and was going to die. Well, guess what? When he got there, the PSA level went back down to normal. Can anybody explain that? We don't know. Did somebody read the wrong test? Did somebody do this? Well, he's fine. Now they want to follow him every 6 months because it did skew. It was out of sync. So sometimes the body heals itself. If you pray, and I tell you what, I believe in prayer. Now I know a lot of people, I believe in high powers. I can hold some rocks, I can hold some dirt, but let me tell you, in the end, I believe that God fixes everything. The creator will fix stuff. So it's just like me. I'm not as wild as I used to be, but off medication, ooh, I thought I was Superman. I could do all things. I could make it happen. I could make your world turn upside down. Being unmedicated was the best thing I ever had in my life. But I realized that I was out of control because you crash at the end of those journeys. See, you don't. What is that song? You don't know what does Stephanie Mills say? You don't know where you're gonna be at your journey's end. I didn't. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in such an array of I was fixing everything for people that I had to wait until somebody looked at me and said, "How can we help you?" I was in fix it mode.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to really sit with ourselves and see where we are supposed to be and who our calling is and what our calling is. Because we can't fix everything. The creator fixes things and makes it right. We can only help in some small way, just some small way.
For sure, for sure. Got a lot of opinions on it. I'll try to stick to my experience, specifically as a peer. Uh, I think it starts in the home. I think it starts with the mother and her son. I think it starts with a father and his son, in allowing those kids to come to them with what is hurting them, and being telling the kids, boys don't cry, men don't cry, is one of the first systemic areas that begins to be put in our minds, because it's a part of a culture. Growing up, there were very few people I could go and tell what was wrong. There was my mother. If I went to her, she would listen, I think, but I didn't know how to do that, and so it starts there. And I can say, as a grown man and facing my problems and attempting to be vulnerable, although people didn't say it, I got the message that nobody wants to hear this Black man cry. I got my own problems. You go take care of yourself, you strong, sir. You strong person. That was a lot of the reaction I got from people. Like, nobody wanted to hear what I had to share because they had their own things. And so just finding ways to begin to create a culture of sharing and of vulnerability in the home is one of the first systemic things we can do across the country to begin to create a different narrative. But as we go outside the home, as we go into the community and go into the systems, the healthcare systems, some of the things that I found is just a different language, a different culture, very different culture. And so as I first began to go to a mental health professional and attempted to share what I was thinking, feeling, seeing, there re- I needed to do a lot of interpreting for the mental health professional on why I saw the things the way I saw them or why I felt the way I did. And because my background was so different from their background, it took a lot of time before we can even get on the same page to have a single conversation about my well-being. And that in itself did a lot to discourage me from continuing the process because I wasn't getting anything out of it. I was just going back week after week talking to someone, and instead of actually getting to what I felt was helpful, we would spend a lot of time talking about why I saw people the way I saw them, or why I interacted in the way I did. And so that what that relates to nowadays is called cultural competency. There's a word for it. There's a whole term for it. And so finding ways to increase the cultural competency of the medical health professionals, but also of our community as we are encouraging them to go into the mental health or to medical healthcare professionals, helping us begin to have more of an education and an understanding about how the medical professionals can help us and what we can do to advocate for ourselves. That's another reason that systemically people from my community may not go because um, the doctors, the healthcare professionals, we have placed them on this pedestal that says whatever they say we need to do. And my grandmother, my mother, from their generation, that was a truth for them. But that may not that isn't the case today. As we go into the healthcare system and talk with doctors and they give us recommendations, we can understand that that's all they are is recommendations and guidelines. And if it doesn't fit with at least our cultural makeup, or with our understanding of who we are, we don't have to accept it. We can talk back to them and tell them, or we can find a second opinion. And so just really being able to increase the cultural competency of the professionals, but also of our community as we encourage them to go into these settings, because it is helpful for us to be able to go and get that help. But it's important also for us to be able to stand on our own feet and be confident that what we're hearing, we understand, and we know what to do with that information and not just accepting it blindly as we have in the past.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Oh, I agree with you, Robert. I mean, we just can't sit back and accept what a doctor tells you as the final say. You've got to ask for that second opinion. You're sitting in the office with your phone, Google it. Because a lot of times, they may prescribe a blood pressure medicine that's not healthy for you. I mean, I had a doctor to do that. Well, guess what? I called my cousin and she said, "Well, I hate to generalize everything, but none of us do well on this medication." And so I took her word over the doctor's word and said, "Hey, in my family, this whole Jones line that I'm affiliated with says we don't do well with that one. We do well with this medication." And you know what? My cousin was right. Shoot, I mean, now I call her Dr. Brenda because I mean, she knew that but look, I trusted the doctor. So I took it home, right, and tried it. I was sick as a dog. She said, "I told you." So when I took the other medication, it worked in sync with the other medications that I take. And so sometimes, like you said, Robert, we have to step out of our comfort zone and think that everything is okay with a physician. My partner has a saying. He says, when you start calling a doctor by his first name, it's time to find another doctor. Well, I've been with my doctor 15 years, so I don't call him doctor anymore. I call him by his first name, John. But my partner just says that's not natural. So a lot of times you have to think about, is this the right doctor if you can call him by his first name and you can diagnose yourself and you can almost prescribe your own medication? He's right. It probably is time for me to look at another clinician that can look more objectively at me instead of one that's looking personally at me. Sometimes there's a clear delineation here: doctor versus friend. I become his friend because I help him with everything else that he needs help with. So sometimes you have to think about, maybe it's time to move on. Maybe your doctor is too comfortable with you. And Anthony went through the same thing. His doctor wasn't listening to him. And so he had to make a hard decision to change doctors as well. I haven't quite gotten there yet. I think I need some more oil, but I just I just love him so much that I don't want to leave him. So sometimes we're going to have to break away and do the right thing, or do the right thing for our bodies. It's the right thing for our bodies and mind to be in sync with someone that can look at you objectively. I mean, I left a doctor because she called me fat. She says your body mass index was high. She said, well, she just looked at me one day and said, you just fat. But guess what I did? I was so mad, I lost weight. I got down to a size 0. Not really, but I mean, it put me on a trajectory to try to do better for myself. No, I didn't want that woman calling me fat. Yeah, I should have reported her to the board, but no, it was my wake up call to try to get back healthier than I was. And so I have to learn that a lot of times people say things that aren't appropriate. They're not for they're just cutting, and they're mean. But it really set me on a path to say, well, maybe I am not as healthy as I should. Maybe I can eat healthier. I may not be a size 0, but maybe I can go from a 26 to a 20, or whatever. But a lot of times we do get mad with our doctors because they do say human things. And I don't think it's meant to like kill us or hurt us or make us cry. But sometimes those kinds of biting words are wake up calls.
I started my journey in January 2020 when I left the hospital.
Mhm.
And in doing so, there are so many things that are available to us that I have utilized. One of the things outside of DBSA's resource, their wellness wheel, UA's wellness wheel, as well
Mhm.
as peer groups. The peer groups is something that has really helped me being able to have a community I can go back to each week. Some people show up, some people don't next week, but being able to have that community and really growing with people over the last few years has been very helpful. But outside of those resources, and I've gotten a lot into mindfulness. And so Insight Timer is an app that has a lot of mindfulness practices on it. That's something that's been very helpful for me. And I'm also like learning a lot about aromatherapy and these different um, ways of calming the nervous system. So breathing practices, smelling particular incense or essential oils, those things have really begun to help me in the moment. Specifically for me, a breathing practice I use pretty consistently is 4-7-8 breathing. Essentially, I'm breathing in for 4 seconds, holding it for 7 seconds, and breathing out for 8 seconds. Dr. Herbert Benson, who is a mind body professional out at Harvard, that's something he created as a way to help step down the nervous system and take you out of fight or flight and get you back into rest and digest.
Mhm.
And so that's something I lean on pretty consistently. And I don't wait until I'm in a crisis in a sense to use it. It's something I use throughout the day. Anytime I'm just sitting there, I just practice some breathing to help calm myself down. And so there are a myriad of resources, and it depends on the day and the situation with
Mhm.
I will go to, but probably Insight Timer is the most consistent resource I've used outside of the DBSA's peer groups and resources and things.
Jimmy, same question.
Oh yeah, Robert, I agree with you. Our wellness wheel is bar none, and a tool that is worthy to look at on where you are and what you're doing. I've taught the wellness wheel at several national meetings, and I believe in mindfulness breathing techniques. I was in a stressful meeting, and I stopped and I started doing a couple of mindful breathing exercises where we can sit in a chair and I'm reciting Maya Angelou's and Still We Rise. We're watching our breath go in and still we rise. We have to remember that that's calming for the body. Breathe in and exhale. And I believe in those as well, Robert, with all my heart. It centers us. Anything that can center our spirit and center our mind so that we can refocus, we are on the right track. And a lot of my colleagues religiously don't like those, but prayer is a part of this wellness. prayer doesn't mean that you've got to, you're invoking all of these things. What you want to do is center yourself through these techniques and where you are the creator is. So you don't need to invoke and get all of these other religious things moving through your head. You need to center yourself so that you can focus on something in front of you or something that you need to do right now. It doesn't mean that you don't have a need to have extended prayers and people praying for you, because I do believe I'm standing on the ancestors and that they propped me up over the years to do this work. And I want all of you to know on this call, you're called to do this work. You wouldn't do it if you didn't want to do it. You wouldn't do it if they paid you $1 million. You're doing it because you're called to this ministry. Ministering for others and ministry to yourself makes you all ministers. So I've ordained you all to do this work.
One other resource, Kimberly, if I could, that came to mind as Jimmy was sharing is just nature, just being outside, outdoors, being in the woods and the trees, around life as the Creator intended, before we built up all these structures around it. Just being able to go out there and reconnect in that way is something else that helps to center and reground me and help me to see what's important in life versus whatever it may be that's running back and forth through my mind.
Most of the referrals that we get are from parents. I have a young lady right now. She was, her mother called and said they found our chapter in North Carolina and that her daughter was trying to find an in-person support group. We just started meeting in person. This young lady is just the cream of the crop. And her mother made that connection for her to contact me. And so the mother three-wayed all of us on the call. And I talked, and this has been about 8 months, and we talk weekly. This young lady is in her late 20s, wonderful, sweet spirit, but it wasn't until that connection was made. See, you have to make these personal connections. And that's how, and I just got off the phone with the young lady tonight. She's in New Jersey. She's doing well. She's picked up the pieces, the mantle with calling our support group members that haven't come. She's sending out the emails. She's doing everything that I could not have ever imagined. It was because I picked up the phone from my Google line and I talked to her mother. And I've worked with a lady for 24 years, and she was agoraphobic, never stepped out of her house, but she would call me every week and talk about the group. Well, one day, guess what? She showed up on the front doorstep of the group and I about fainted. She said she had never stepped out of her house, but she wanted to see what I looked like in person. It took her 22 years. I know it sounds like a Joel Osteen sermon, but let me tell you, it took 22 years to get this woman to my support group. And what did I do? Faint. I could not believe it. She said, "Hi, Jimmy. This is Sherry." So sometimes it doesn't happen when we think it's going to happen. It took me 22 years to get this woman to show up at a support group that never stepped out of her house. Pre-COVID, pre-anything. Think about how long ago 22 years from now. I had to think back how it was 22 years. So sometimes it doesn't work when you want it to work. It works when all the stars, the moon lines up with each other. So, that's how I look at it sometimes. I'll yield to Robert.
Yeah, no, and I was going to go in much of a similar vein of the best thing I believe a parent could do. I haven't been in that position. I have adult kids. But from my perspective, my own story, the best thing I believe a parent could do is continue to be supportive of their child and the decisions they make, even if it's not the decision the parent believes they should make. And the reason being because they may hit something that is truly overwhelming for them. And if they don't have that one place they can run back to for safety, they may feel like they're all alone and there's nobody in the world that they can turn to, and they decide to do something else. And so even if your support is only just being there, allowing them to continue to trip over their own feet until they realize they need help, because that's what it will take for them to get the help, is their own self belief or self referral, I believe, is just being there and being supportive and loving and letting them know that you will always be there for them. And the second thing that comes to mind is finding someone in your life that may have a situation that's similar to what your kid is experiencing, and finding ways to connect them so that the kid can talk to someone who has been in their shoes or has experienced the things that they are experiencing. And that peer, that I think the peer, I call it the gospel of peer support. Because
Hmm.
once you realize that
Hmm.
someone else has gone through what you're experiencing, their words begin to hold a little bit more weight. And what was solutions for them may not be solutions for you. But the fact that you see this person that was dead and now they're alive, walking, and now they're trying to help you do so gives you a little bit more hope so that you can begin to continue to find those things that may work for you. And so continuing to be in their corner as that support, that cheerleader for them and their wellness, while also trying to find individuals that may be able to speak to them on their level. Because when I'm on the outside trying to help someone else, it can come across as you're broke, I am fixed, and I need to help you get better so that you won't be broke anymore. Whereas a peer is like, we all broke out here, but there's hope for us, and let's figure out what that looks like for you. And so that's just my thoughts. Friends are not a part of the Black community that supports me in my mental health. So that is the space. That is the space for healing. That is the space for growth. We need allies. We need people to help carry our burdens. And so just being a presence that allows someone to share non-judgmentally is a great start to it. Continue to be open, continue to listen, and continue to just encourage that individual to take care of themselves is the best thing. Again, all of my allies, 98% of them aren't from the Black community, and
Hmm.
so you all are the ones we need to help us.
A lot of my allies are not in my little network of DBSA. They're outside of that. But the questions that I encourage people to say is, "How are you?" and listen for a response. Don't try to fix it. People try to fix us, and I think that's the biggest thing is, so why did you do that? When did you find out you were bipolar? What happened then? Why did you have so many hospitalizations? You can get, I mean, from our own people, we get that. And that's when we put up the shield. Well, I mean, we go into defense mode because those are not appropriate questions. I just want you to to be in communion with me and just say, "Hey, I understand your journey. I'm just here to support you. How can I help you?" I think those are the kind of questions that we need to start talking to our allies about. What are appropriate questions to ask people on the spectrum, on any spectrum, whether it's a mental issue or a physical issue or health issue. How can we be in communion with you and support you? Do you need us to get groceries? Do you need a baby train to get diapers? What is it that we can do to support you and your family? And I think, starting with those kinds of questions can lead to us being more vulnerable or vulnerable enough to tell them that I had a crisis this morning. My crisis was blah, blah. But we don't feel as comfortable as Black or people of color to even tell people that we had a mental health crisis. I've told the world this morning that I broke down. That's not something that I would have done if both of my parents were living because I needed to be strong and prosper, as Spock would say. But sometimes I just break down and I haven't broken down in a while, but that vulnerability is still within me. And I'm glad to have it. And I'm glad that I can open up to you guys and say that.
Allowing the Black men that are there, that are a part of it, of the groups, to become spokespersons out in communities where there are more Black males. Again, it's when I share my story that other Black males will come up to me and it's like, man, I thought it was just me. I've never been able to tell anybody this, but it is we can be the bait, if you will, to bring in more Black men, and that's the value of our story.
Hmm.
As Jimmy said, that's we are all ministers in in this field, and that's how that gospel works, by going out and telling our testimony and sharing our story and
Hmm.
how we have overcome. We shall overcome him by the word of our testimony,
Hmm.
and that is what brings more people in to say, "Oh, there's some help over here." Everywhere else I've been shot down. I've been ridiculed, I've been
Hmm.
put down, but over here, here's at least one Black male that sees me for who I am and accepts me, and I'm going to go hang out with him because I believe that he can help me grow. So I believe utilizing those that are a part of your community and group to be the magnet for others to come could be helpful.
Agree with you, Robert. And piggybacking on what you said, I agree with you. When people see you by your actions and by your love, they are attracted to you, and they will come to you, and they'll find you, and they'll seek you out. My biggest thing was I did the Christmas appeal last year. Some people in my circle didn't even know I was bipolar. They didn't even know my journey. And so opening up to DBSA and letting them use my name as a Christmas appeal, that was the most vulnerable thing I've ever done. And I'll do it again and again because um, I feel so humbled by the opportunity to share my story in hopes that it'll save another life or save someone else. We had a lot of deaths in my DBSA local group. We had 4. And I want to make sure that people know that they can talk to all of us and try to make things a little bit more palatable during those hard times.